Hello and welcome to this special conversation on behalf of Minari. I'm Dave Karger. I'm a host on Turner Classic Movies, and I'm so happy to be here with the lead actor and writer-director. So please welcome Steven Yeun and Lee Isaac Chung. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations on this absolutely beautiful film. I want to start off with a question because I was watching an interview that you guys and the rest of the cast gave for Variety at Sundance, and you two described yourselves as semi-related. Now, that's not a genealogical term that I've heard before. Can you please explain what semi-related means?
I have the amazing fortune of not only being married to my wife, but my wife being cousins with a genius filmmaker in Lee Isaac Chung. So that's been, yeah, which I knew he was a director, but like, yeah, we never talked about any of this until a script magically appeared out of nowhere one year. It was bonkers.
Yeah, so Steven's married. My cousin Joe, who grew up in Arkansas, not that far away from me. I just knew that she's dating this actor, and then he's on The Walking Dead, and that was shocking me. And then of course everything blew up for him, and I wrote a script. I didn't want to bother him with any of my personal projects, and I worried about that, like affecting our family relationship. But luckily, our agent kind of stepped in and said that this project looks like a good match for both of us. So she kind of bridged that gap for us.
Yeah, so it sounds like neither one of you wanted to impose on the other when what was waiting for both of you at the end of this rainbow was this incredible partnership.
Yeah, truly.
Feels very fortunate in that way. I don't know. Yeah, it feels great that it kind of happened naturally, I would say, and then I don't know, working together, it obviously deepened our relationship.
That's great. Isaac, I believe this is your fourth narrative feature film as a director. Have you been kind of working towards this moment of essentially telling your own story on film? Is this something you kind of had in mind as you've been making the films leading up to this?
Yeah, for sure. I had this in mind when I even started to go to film school. I thought this is a story I'd like to tell someday, but I never felt ready. And in a way, I think it was around 2018, I started to feel different factors lining up. Like my daughter turned the age that David is in the film, and so I was kind of starting to see the world more through her eyes and remembering back to what it was like to be a kid. And I got inspired by this writer, Willa Cather, who kind of wrote about how her own work started off when she started to really mine her memories, rather than just simply, try to admire other authors. So in a way, when I sat down to write this, I did this in 2018. It almost felt like a first film. It almost felt like I was finally taking a certain step that I needed to take for all this time.
Wow, Willa Cather, did she write My Antonia?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that book is about her growing up in Nebraska in a way, but told in a very fictional way. So that was a definite inspiration for this. And you'll notice the moving truck says Cather Moving Company when the film is starting. And really that's a journey that I owe to her, I feel.
That's great. So did you find that there were childhood memories of yours that were almost locked away that you didn't know about, and then having your daughter reach that certain age unlocked them? Is that what you're saying?
I would definitely say so. Yeah. Just seeing the way that she responds to things and the questions that she asks, seeing myself in those questions and remembering those types of questions I had about my own parents. I think that unlocked a lot. And then, of course, I sat down with pen and paper and wrote down all these memories I had from that age. So I felt like I was seeing things through her eyes, but I was also seeing things through my parents' eyes because now I'm the age that they were. And things started to click that this is a story about a whole family, and it's not necessarily just a story about a young boy, but each family member having a very unique perspective.
Stephen, as people may or may not know, you were born in South Korea, moved to Canada with your family briefly, and then to the United States.
Mhm.
What was it about this story that you found you could relate to most?
Um, honestly, like the journey through the experience, and then even now, is still kind of unpacking things that I relate to about the immigrant experience. I wasn't born here as a second generation, and because I came over at an early age, I think I got a taste of perhaps maybe the sense of isolation that I think um, people that immigrate here are kind of trapped within, and but further, I think I felt attracted to just kind of this liminal third space that I think these people occupy and we occupy, that oftentimes gets caught in the conversation as being caught between two worlds, which I think is somewhat accurate. But I mean, as we kind of get further in generations, especially our generation, um, it feels more and more like it's its own thing, and that's kind of what was really attractive about it. Isaac wrote something true to the singular experience that is its own thing, and that's what was really lovely.
Isaac, overall, what's your recollection of the process of assembling this cast? Because you have actors from all over the globe, some English speaking, some Korean speaking, Stephen, Will Patton, all of these great people with varying levels of experience. And as I said, coming from different places. How did that make the casting of this unique?
I'd say part of the fun of doing this was it felt like I was building a family as almost as the protagonist of the story. So I knew that just as important as it is to have the individual parts, it needs to work as a cohesive family unit. And Stephen came on board first, as we mentioned about our agent kind of setting that up. And once that happened, I was really trying to figure out how to fit all the pieces around that, around Stephen, and to let that work. I was in Korea at the time. I was teaching overseas, and that's how I was able to spend time with YJ, Yoon Yajong, and Han Yeri. I met them through a producer friend of mine who's in Korea named Ina Lee, and I just knew that they would be perfect and that they would fit so perfectly with Steven, that there's this feeling about a family if you just have those three together. And once I came back to the US, finding the kids, that was extremely stressful and difficult. We had a wonderful casting director named Julia Kim who kind of scoured all the different Korean American, I don't know, organizations, churches, things like that, to find non-professional child actors who could speak Korean and English fluently. And the fact that we found both Alan Kim and Noah K. Cho amongst that mix within, I think it was within like 1 month, it was really remarkable. Alan stood out to me from the get-go. His audition he was just so magnetic once you see him that every time I clicked on play, I would just start laughing when I see his face pop up. So I knew there's something special about him. And then Noelle, she just was a big sister from the very beginning. Like, she was telling me about her little brother when we first started talking. And I mean, she was Anne as soon as I saw her. And Will Patton, we go back a few years. He acted in a previous film of mine. And that's right, Abigail Harm. We've stayed friends, and I think the world of him. And I've been telling him I'd love to work with him again. The first person I saw while writing the script was Will in this role of Paul. So I want to say that there's something about that kept me going as I was writing, because I knew the world needed to see Will Patton as Paul, and that would be a really special character. So that was a lot of fun writing with him in mind.
I feel like this could be something similar to a Jason Reitman, J.K. Simmons relationship, where every movie you make, you're going to find something for Will Patton to do.
I'm going to try. Yeah, that's the goal.
I'll never forget 14 years old watching No Way Out, and thinking, who is this guy? And that incredible moment, shocking moment that his character has at the end of that movie. And so it's great him used to such terrific effect. So that's great.
He always shows up and makes a film better. I gotta say, there's something about him. Yeah.
Stephen, from your point of view, similar question: what was it like for you, as the first person on the call sheet, I would imagine, to see this disparate group of actors come together as a cohesive whole?
It was awesome. I think, it's a real testament to, I think, Isaac's direction. The way that he looks at people and sees people, not just for their ability and whether they fit the particular role, but also kind of, I think he attracts and builds really kind people that are willing to service something larger. And I think that kind of gets back to Will. As I saw everybody come together, I felt like every actor fit their character so well, and the dynamic on multiple levels felt right. So the family didn't have a tough time kind of coming together. And then when Will came, like a week or so later, he was so gracious about how he entered, the film, how he was so not necessarily just respectful from a cultural standpoint, because I felt like that could be false in some way, but he was respectful in such a human way, where he knew he was servicing something larger. And I think maybe that's a testament to how wonderful of an actor he is. I think he always kind of submits to that idea. And when he came, I remember sitting down with him for lunch, and he was telling me, he's like, "Hey, I hope things are going well. Like, he wasn't nervous. He's a professional, but I think he was just saying, he knew he was entering into new space. And I don't know why, because I would never say this to him ever, because I respect him. But I was just like, I feel like this movie is bringing together the people that it needs. And he looked at me and he was like, cool. And then we just kind of settled into that space right from that point on. Yeah. And it was really cool working with everybody.
Isaac, when you think back to the casting process, was there one role that sticks out as being particularly difficult to cast?
I mean, they're all ones that I took very seriously. So maybe two stories on that. The first one was Alan. I just knew this is going to be tough. He was the youngest of the auditions, and he doesn't have the technical training because he hasn't acted before. So I was a little worried about that, and I knew that we would have fewer working hours with him. But just having him do an audition with Steven in LA and seeing how they relate together, that just showed me a snapshot of what Minari was going to be. And I had no doubts after that. And Steven was gracious enough to do that audition and to come and read with Alan and to kind of show him the ropes a little bit. And I feel like Steven continued to do that on set and made it work because all the actors were being so generous to each other. Another element that was really difficult for me was for a moment, I wasn't sure if Yeti, who plays Monica, was going to be able to come and do the film because of scheduling issues. So I was so stressed because I could only see her in the part. And I just knew that her dynamic with Steven was going to be incredibly enriching for both of them, that neither was going to one up the other, that they're both going to be so perfectly aligned in these parts as a married couple, and that both would add different levels of depth to their roles, like Jacob in his search and quest for greatness, and then Monica in her quest to keep the family together. And luckily, I forget, there were so many factors that created this like tiny sliver of time for her to be able to come. And that to me was a miracle. And I thought for a moment, that's what comforted me in thinking, okay, maybe we're going to be okay with this production because this miracle happened. So maybe we'll see more.
Stephen, from your point of view, have you, and sorry if I don't know the answer to this, if I'm not thinking of something off the top of my head,
Mm.
have you ever had a job where you've had to work so much with kids? I mean, you have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, but how about from the
Yeah,
professional point of view?
no, that was the first time. Yeah, that was the first time. It was it was great. I felt, um, it felt great that I have my own kids to kind of to model off of a little bit. But beyond that, I think the beauty of working with Alan and Noel is they keep you so honest. They're so present, and they haven't been tainted by life as much. I think, and the process of it as much. And so, when you're talking to them and you're acting with them, you got to be real. And if you're not real, they'll be like, they'll tell you in many ways that they don't believe you, whether they look away or like they get bored or whatever. But yeah, they were so present, which forced me to be present, and that was like the greatest gift from a scene partner.
I think one of the reasons why so many people are just loving this movie so much is that it works on these two different levels of being this very intimate, singular family story, but also feeling like a much larger American story, if you will. When you guys were making it, and Isaac, when you were writing it and crafting it and imagining it, but also when you were making it, did it feel like a big story or did it feel like a little story or both?
Um, well, you kind of have to make a film with the what you're given when it comes to the resources, and I kind of knew as I was writing this film, the maybe the scope of the film that I could realistically be able to have access to, if that makes sense. Um, so in a way, I knew that the way that the film is going to be made needed to be on a simpler level, or on a more I don't know, essential level, but that the story itself needed to be big, like the feeling of it, the heart of it needed to be big. And that idea kind of followed me as I was in production and throughout the entire edit, that essentially it, it's a modest film. It's a modest sort of, we have modest means in making the story. But as much as I can, I wanted the film to contain an epic. So thematically and feeling wise, the sort of emotions that you have while you're watching it, the ending that you have, I didn't want it to feel like this is merely a slice of life film, but that really you're on an epic journey, even though, you know, we're shooting in a trailer home in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's only so much that you can do. And it's a credit to Laki, our DP, and our production designer, Yong, because they were all on board with this idea. We would look at old classic Hollywood Westerns on one hand, to drive that feeling of the epic, but we'd also think about Ozu, like the Japanese filmmaker who made these intimate family dramas. We wanted to figure out, how do you balance these two, the intimacy with the epic sort of feeling. And that's what we hoped for. And it kind of culminated in that scene where we lit something on fire. We wanted that to really feel like the culmination of that feeling. And luckily we got the right burn with that one.
What are some of the Westerns you watched?
For me, Big Country was one, Giant, East of Eden. Um, yeah, those were some. John Ford, of course, are ones that I just watch all the time.
Stephen, can you address the same question that I just asked Isaac about, shooting this and whether it felt intimate or grand in a way?
Yeah. I mean, I echo those same sentiments. I think what was really cool was, I think from, a cultural standpoint specifically, I felt so enriched by the fact that when Isaac wrote this script, it was really directly, truthfully from the point of view of this family. So in that way, it felt intimate. It felt like it didn't require a juxtaposition to anything else besides just its own intrinsic story. And so because of that, it felt like we were tackling things that felt authentic and real. And then to have, incredible production designers and like people to like maintain the details in a way, and all the actors to maintain the details, but carry them instead of explaining them, felt very beautifully intimate. And then on a larger front, what was really wonderful was, it made me fall in love with it, or perhaps it made me understand why I love participating in film so much, because you get to access and kind of work towards a larger existential idea, um, instead of the opposite, which might be TV, just kind of getting into the more granular things. And both of those things are important, but for me, I've been really, yeah, I was so much in service to an existence, that was, just like he said, when he said giant and big country and East of Eden, we talked a lot about, the right model for this for Jacob specifically, and James Dean came up a lot. Just someone kind of caught in a liminal space that can see things for what they are and desperately wants to shake everybody awake, or at least not feel so isolated and alone. And there was something so resonant about that. So it felt like I was accessing something deeply human, and in that way, it felt large and small at the same time.
Stephen, I would imagine just goes without saying that as an actor, you feel an extra layer of responsibility when you're helping tell the filmmaker's own story and essentially playing a character inspired by his own father. How did you wrap your head around that and get to a place where that didn't become a paralyzing factor for you?
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, I think the paralysis which came, at one point actually came from something other than, feeling like I needed to service Isaac's family. Because I think what was really great about how he wrote this, script was he left a lot of space for us to, he wrote it true. So it felt like he left space for us to kind of bring our own perspectives into it. And in the way that he directed it, he allowed us that access. And when we all kind of got on the same page of understanding that we were servicing this one singular family, it became a little bit more clear to me, and kind of unlocked me from the paralysis of feeling like, frankly, the biggest fear was I felt like I was servicing, in some ways, the Korean American immigrant community. And that was terrifying because, we really haven't seen uncaricatured renderings of our parents' generation. And then even further, we haven't, at least I haven't seen renderings of that generation told in kind of its duality and fullness, so that they might simultaneously be bad and good at the same time. Usually it's from our gaze, or it's from, the American gaze. And so it holds them either to the fire of suffering, or through some sort of honoring because of their suffering. And while we don't ignore that life is hard in this film, it was really more about letting them be true. And that was very fulfilling in and of itself.
Isaac, in a general sense, I mean, I don't want you to give everything away, or I don't want to ruin Santa Claus here. But if one end of the spectrum is this is your family's story, what this audience has just seen, and the other end of the spectrum is a story that was inspired by yours, but really in the specifics of it, not so much your story, where does this movie fall?
It's so hard. There's no way I could watch this film with you and just even say this is false, this is true. It's I'll put it this way. As I was writing it, I wanted a lot of separation, and I wanted this family to be as much fictional and their own family as possible. And that's why I named them the E family. They're not the Chung family. And I changed details. I changed, the way that my father was, or even the way my grandmother was much more vulgar, by the way, than what you see in the film. So I changed a lot of things, but at the same time, when I finally showed my family, all of them reported to have been unable to sleep at night because they had so many dreams about our past. And so even my mother, who's unable to dream about my grandmother, she said, I never have dreams about grandmother, but I finally had one after I watched your film. The funny thing is, my mom said she saw my grandmother played by Yoon Ya Jung in her dream. There's something about the film that maybe captures the spiritual truth of what we went through, and you know what life was like for us. Because all of that I didn't lie, and all of that I tried to be as honest as possible about how I feel, and you know, all those things I feel about my family. But a lot of the facts, of course, they're shifted around to try to make for a good story.
Right. Let me finish by asking a question. I mean, this movie is just now beginning to be seen. It has played, you know, some film festivals. You did get to have a proper premiere experience at Sundance, which went very well. By and large, are you guys both noticing any differences in the way an Asian audience member responds to this film and a Caucasian audience member? Have you noticed any trends? Stephen, you're nodding your head.
I think it's kind of case by case, even within those delineations too. You know, I think, you know, you speak to maybe, you just realize that, you know, people are all in process of understanding kind of themselves in so many different ways, that how they receive it is really kind of based on their perspective. And I think that's kind of the beauty of what Isaac wrote, was he wrote something that felt spiritually true, like he said. And so you can identify with anybody's kind of storyline from that point on. You know, there's people that hate Jacob. There's people that feel validated by Jacob. There's people that, you know, see Monica clearly, and other people that don't see Monica as clearly. And I think, like, you know, through running the gamut of all those characters, and I think what was, to me, the coolest thing that I think is the catch-all for everybody, is, you know, we purposely sought, and Isaac did it, of just not putting up any barriers of entry. He didn't require explanation to a white audience. He didn't ruminate and juxtapose whiteness to this family, whether it be by oppression or through suffering or through explanation or any of those things. He just told it from their intrinsic perspective, which then kind of allows a humanity to bleed through. And in that way, I think everyone can then just identify from real positions of like, oh, that's like a father's journey that I know, or like that's like a mother, that's like my grandparents. And that's, to me, like the most beautiful part of it, is like everybody can kind of see themselves in this, independent of where they're from.
And I'm sure that was a conscious decision on your part, Isaac, right?
Certainly so. I mean, just hearing that, I mean, that's honestly what I hope for. And yeah, when I get comments of people who want to come up and talk to me about their grandmothers, it doesn't matter if they're Black or if they're from Latinx community, or yeah, it seems like that has mattered less, and it's been more about just people wanting to talk about their families with me. And honestly, that's been so touching. And that's kind of what this film was meant to be about.
That's great. I so appreciate you guys taking some time to talk to me for this audience today. And thank you all for watching this conversation. Congratulations again to both of you, Stephen Yeun, Lee Isaac Chung. Really appreciate it. Hope I get to see you guys soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
this. This is great. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.